focus of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
Let's start with this. Well, Robert Garcia, the brother of Mikey Garcia, had this to say. He says, Pacquiao is the only fight we want for Mikey at welterweight. He's quoted as saying, well, look, being Mikey's brother and trainer, you know, with my dad, with my son, we all agree that's the only fight we would really want Mikey to do at welterweight. You know, he wants to have another welterweight fight, and he wants to get a title, and I think Manny's the biggest fight out there for Mikey, but it's also the one that matches better for Mikey because Pacquiao is not as big as all the other welterweights. Pacquiao was a flyweight at one time, you know? Even though his body has developed into a solid welterweight, he's not as big, he's not as tall, you know? Very dangerous, very fast, very strong. But that's probably the only fight that we're okay with at welterweight. Even though I still think it's a very dangerous fight, I think that's the only one that we could probably agree to with my father. Everybody around our team. That's the only one that we would want for Mikey at welterweight. Hearn was trying to find financing to bring a Pacquiao-Garcia fight to Saudi Arabia sometime this summer in the immediate aftermath of Garcia's victory over Vargas at the Dallas Cowboys training facility, Ford Center, at the Star. Opposing the Philippines, Pacquiao would not only secure Garcia another big payday, it'd offer the Oxnard, California native an opportunity against the WBA welterweight champion to win a title in a fifth division. I love that fight, Roach said. It's a very good fight. This confirms what we've been talking about here on the channel all along, that Mikey Garcia is looking at Manny Pacquiao, and Manny Pacquiao and his people, they're looking back. When it comes to Mikey, it's due to Mikey's size, and when it comes to Manny, it's due to Manny's age. Both sides view each other as the ideal candidates for a fight.
What I thought.
Could be their very next fight. That's what I've been telling you. Why would you go in there with a Terrence Crawford, with an Errol Spence? Why would you go in there with those guys if you're Manny Pacquiao? You're 40, 41 years old, you're an 8th division champion, you've been there and done that with more accomplished fighters than these fighters. Why would you go with any one of those guys when you can get the same as, if not more money, with the likes of a Mikey Garcia? Of course the Pacquiao team is going to like the sound of that. Of course Freddie Roach is going to like that proposition more than he's ever liked the proposition of Manny fighting Terrence Crawford.
Exactly.
It was about Terrence Crawford. You didn't hear Freddie Roach saying, I love that fight.
Nope.
You heard the opposite. You heard concern as far as the Garcia side of things. Robert Garcia and his father have made things crystal clear. They're not on board for Mikey having a long stay in the welterweight division. This is really the only fight that they like for him at 147 pounds. So all that talk coming from Mikey about potentially fighting Terrence Crawford or Sean Porter, a rematch with Errol Spence. I think I even heard him mention Keith Thurman. I'm not sure. But all that kind of talk, anything outside of a Pacquiao fight, let me tell you something. Don't look for Mikey to fight those fucking guys. I don't see it. I don't think for a second that Mikey is still in the welterweight division to fight any one of them. If he's still there, knowing that he is at a great disadvantage in this weight class, if he's still there, it's because he's holding out hope that he will land the Pacquiao fight. As for Pacquiao, he's a much more attractive option.
We've said all this before.
But there is still that which needs to be addressed. There is still that needs to be reconciled. As we all know, Mikey Garcia is not the only guy in the running for a Pacquiao fight. Earlier today, Danny Garcia released a public statement saying that he's coming back very soon, sometime in September, against either Manny Pacquiao, who we just talked about,
Or Errol Spence.
Comes to this kind of a situation, Danny Garcia and Danny Garcia alone cannot confirm whether or not he's going to fight Manny Pacquiao. We need confirmation on both sides. We need the Pacquiao people to confirm that Danny's going to be the next guy that he fights. As it stands, we've yet to receive any kind of confirmation from that side. It's very important to the conversation. If Manny ends up fighting Danny in the near future, where does that leave Mikey? Where does that leave Errol? If he ends up fighting Mikey,
Then what?
the logical assumption would be that Danny's going to go ahead and fight Errol in September. That's the way the cookie crumbles. That's the way it all breaks down. I've long wondered, what is the state of Manny Pacquiao's relationship with the PBC? Is he free to move around to other platforms, the way that Mikey did for that Jesse Vargas fight, which was his last fight, which was featured on DAZN under the Matchroom banner? Does Manny Pacquiao have any other obligations to fulfill for the PBC as part of his agreement with them, or is he free to roam? I sincerely doubt that Manny Pacquiao is under the kind of slave contract that many of the other PBC's fighters are under. He's a much bigger name than them. You can't just put your thumb on that guy and tell him to do what's what. It's Manny fucking Pacquiao we're talking about here.
Fuck him.
Mikey Garcia can find his way to some other side of the street. Surely Manny Pacquiao could, if he so chose to do so.
Will he?
I can sit here and tell you that those Saudis have got deep pockets, and if they have a genuine interest in hosting a Pacquiao versus Mikey Garcia fight, they can be very persuasive, they can be very convincing.
He'd make more money with Mikey than Danny.
The clock is ticking for Manny Pacquiao. His time really isn't on his side. I mean, we see that Mikey's looking at him, and Manny, he's looking back, but there is still the matter of Danny Garcia's recent comments to reconcile.
There is.
Ultimately, we're not going to know what's actually going on until the Pacquiao people speak on it, as no doubts. They're the ones who are going to make the final call. It's their decision. Manny Pacquiao is the A-side in any of these scenarios, whether it's Mikey Garcia or Danny Garcia. So until it's coming from Manny, we really won't know what the fuck is going on here. I will say we've talked about a potential Danny Garcia versus Errol Spence fight. What to look for in that fight, what to think about, how it all breaks down, and I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. In other news, Michael Benson tweeted, Bob Arum has clarified that all that talk of Deontay Wilder considering a step-aside deal was fantasy. He said when reports emerged about approaches to host Fury versus Joshua, Wilder's team made it clear they had no interest and never asked for any amount of money. Making all of those preliminary reports we saw earlier this week a lot of hogwash, a lot of rubbish. Look, I told you guys from the get-go.
Weeks ago.
Why I didn't imagine that Deontay Wilder, nor his team, wanted him to step aside.
They didn't.
I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. Furthermore, even if Deontay Wilder and his team were willing to step aside, I didn't imagine that a penny pincher like Bob would pony up the cash. Why would I pay this guy $5 or $10 million, whatever amount, to step aside when my guy just ran him over? My guy just mowed him down like grass on his lawn. For what reason would I pay this guy anything in excess of $5 to $10 million to step aside when I can just have my guy beat him up again? And the only way that scenario is even feasible is if perhaps, and I'm going out on a limb here, Eddie Hearn were to help the people over there at Top Rank pony up some of that cash to ensure he delivers the Joshua versus Fury fight. The problem is, Eddie Hearn's got no contractual obligations to Deontay Wilder or the people over there at the PBC, so why would he take on the responsibility of ponying up the step-aside money when that's Top Rank's job? That's Top Rank's problem. A Top Rank fighter has a contract, a contractual obligation he must fulfill, and that is hardly Eddie Hearn or Anthony Joshua's problem. Thus,
They gotta do it.
the responsibility of getting Wilder to step aside and ponying up the cash for him to do so, that falls on Bob, that falls on Fury, that falls on Top Rank.
They ain't doing it.
That is the only scenario I saw that perhaps, maybe, could allow for the undisputed title fight to happen sooner than later if Eddie Hearn were willing to help them pony up that cash, but even that seemed far-fetched at the time. In all likelihood, I anticipated that Fury would be fighting Deontay Wilder in his very next fight, and that does appear to be the case. As Tyson Fury was quoted as saying, "I won't pay Wilder a step-aside fee. I'd rather batter him." Was quoted as saying, "I think we've got the rematch with Wilder on as well at some point. Then we've got 2 AJ fights. Well, one, and then obviously when I batter him, he'll want a rematch." Wilder's got a rematch clause. Some newspaper reported that he wanted $10 million to step aside, but I'm not paying him no money to step aside. I'd rather take his scalp again. I'll beat him in the ring. That's how I'll get him out of the way, Fury stated during an Instagram live interview. I wouldn't pay him $2 million to step aside. I'd rather give him another battering again. I'm going to take him out again for the 3rd time, hopefully at the end of the year. And then we're going into 2021 with the biggest fight in boxing boxing history between two undefeated...
He say undefeated?
Yeah, he did. British heavyweights, me and AJ, and we're going to battle it out for all the gold. There used to be a three-headed monster in this division. Me, Wilder, and Joshua. And then Ruiz knocked out Joshua, burst that bubble, broke him in, and then I broke in the Bronze Bomber. 3 became 2, and then 2 became 1. And now I'm a standalone soldier. And they all need to come through me now. And it's not an easy task because I guard the gate. You gotta think about how this all breaks down. For Tyson Fury, this is a very big financial opportunity in more ways than one, as he now has the lion's share of the pot going into the Deontay Wilder rubber match. If he makes it through that, like many people are expecting him to, he's going to have 2 even bigger paydays, with Anthony Joshua win or lose. So paying Wilder to step aside, that don't even come into it. If anybody's going to end up getting some kind of step-aside fee, some kind of step-aside deal, it won't be Wilder. It'll be Dillian Whyte. Tyson Fury holds on to that green belt after this rubber match. Dillian Whyte is going to be in a pole position to challenge him, as Dillian Whyte is the interim champion. This is mandatory. And if anybody's going to have to be paid to step aside in the near future, it will be Dillian, not Deontay. And that brings us to another arm of this conversation. Part of it that I don't often see covered. What if Dillian doesn't want to step aside? What if he doesn't take the step aside deal? What if he enforces the mandatory and Tyson Fury is obligated to oblige him? What happens then?
Uh-oh.
Well, in the unlikely scenario that enough money can't be conjured up to pay Dillian to go somewhere else and do something else, Tyson Fury will have to fight him, and in all likelihood, Anthony Joshua will be then forced to satisfy his mandatory challenger. The winner of Chisora versus Usyk. Now, I'm not telling you this is the likeliest scenario. In all likelihood, if a couple of millions can be conjured up for Dillian Whyte to simply sit on his hands and wait, I think that Dillian will take it, as allowing Tyson Fury to move seamlessly into the Joshua fight doesn't cost Dillian Whyte his title shot. If anything, it's a better situation for him, because once he challenges the winner, it won't just be for the green belt. It'll be for all the belts. It's actually more beneficial for Dillian to take a step-aside offer. And I think he will. I think he might. But in the event that he doesn't, I think what we can expect to see is Anthony Joshua move on from the Pulev fight to satisfy his WBO mandatory and the winner of Usyk versus Chisora. That could be the way the cookie crumbles. In either scenario, these are sizable fights of some interest. People have long speculated as to whether or not Usyk has what it takes to become a world champion in the heavyweight division, as some others have, some other cruiserweights from the past, previous generations. Is he cut from the same cloth as those fighters? That is a question that has yet to be answered. But in this scenario, it would bring us that much closer to that answer. But back to the point, as far as Wilder stepping aside, well, I was never expecting him to, and it appears that I was right not to, because he doesn't intend to. And finally, Eubank Jr. One of the best decisions I've made in my career is to train with Roy Jones Jr. Chris Eubank Jr. happened to be in town supporting his friend Kevin Newman for his fight. And after the fight, Chris was quoted as saying, "That's where I got to sit down and speak with him."
Roy Jones.
Being a middleweight and super middleweight, Roy has always been a fighter I've admired and who I looked up to throughout my entire career. Being able to sit down and pick his brain for 5-10 minutes, that night was a big deal. He's a really cool guy. Him mentioning that he had his own gym, Kevin said he has a private farm in Pensacola where he went for a week or so to train for his fight camp. That was all knowledge in the back of my mind, like, okay, I'd like to go out there at some point and see how it is. In the past, it was to ask him a bunch of questions, take a picture, and that was it. I kind of left that night thinking it would be cool to train with Roy at some point. I didn't know when. His only purpose in town to train and to enjoy the lifestyle the Strip has to offer, there was no longer a reason to stick around. The only question was his next move. I was like, wow, I gotta get out there. What was I gonna do? I can't train. There's nothing to do, and there's really no other reason to be in Vegas. So what was I going to do? Eubank Jr. pondered. Then it came to mind, message Roy, and he has a private gym. That would be perfect. This is the perfect opportunity to test it out. I called my dad, told him everything was closing down, and there was no longer a reason to be in Vegas. Can you get a hold of Roy and ask him if I can come train with him? Within an hour, he said yeah, It was cool. I was on the plane the next day. I've been here for over 2 months now. Actually upset that I haven't met this man early on in my career, admits Eubank Jr., who made his United States debut last December in a 2-round injury stoppage of Matvey Korobov in Brooklyn, New York. The training, the way we got on, and everything we've been doing has been amazing. Definitely one of the best decisions I've made in my career to come train with him. Roy and I are going to be working together for years. Well, look, I don't know how beneficial or detrimental this new partnership will prove to be down the line, but I will say it can't be any worse than what Chris had going on before, right? Chris has always struck me as an unfinished product, a very good physical specimen, good engine, good punching power.
And volume.
Lest we forget, it only took him 3 rounds to dispatch Avni Yildirim at 168 pounds, where it took Anthony Durrell something like 10. Chris, he can punch. As a physical specimen, Chris is a good piece of work. But tactically, strategically, in the realm of skills, he's always struck me as a unfinished product. There's potential there, but it's untapped potential. Pairing up with Roy, it can't be any worse than what Chris had going on before.
Right?
There is something to be said about Chris's enthusiasm. That's always encouraging. That's always a good sign. An excited fighter, excited about what the future holds, what is just beyond the horizon. Shows the kind of headspace that the fighter is in. And the fact that he admires Roy's career, as many of us do, he's willing to listen, to soak up what knowledge, what wisdom Roy Jones Jr. might have to offer. It's important that the fighter walk into that kind of a situation as an open book, a sponge looking to soak up what knowledge a veteran trainer, veteran fighter might have to offer, and not a headstrong,
stubborn,
unfocused, undisciplined, unreceptive fighter like Andy Ruiz was after the first Anthony Joshua fight, per Manny Robles' recent comments. The fighter's got to be willing to learn, and Chris Eubank Jr. does seem more than willing. That is important, that is pivotal. So to surmise my thoughts on this recent partnership, I'll reiterate, it can't be any worse than what Chris Eubank Jr. had going on before. He seemed like clay, waiting to be molded into a better fighter, a better version of himself. It didn't seem like Chris was really living up to his potential in spite of his namesake, but maybe now, we'll actually see the very best of Chris Eubank Jr.